In April 1994, Seattle was gray and quiet, the kind of sky that made even fame feel small. Inside a greenhouse above a garage on Lake Washington Boulevard, one of music's brightest stars was gone. Kurt Cobain, the 27-year-old frontman of Nirvana, had taken his own life. At least, that's what police said. The world accepted that story almost immediately, but one man didn't. His name was Tom Grant, a private investigator from Los Angeles, a former sheriff's detective who believed the truth wasn't what it seemed. Ironically, he'd been hired by Courtney Love, Cobain's wife, to help find Kurt after he went missing from rehab. What Grant saw in those final days made him question everything about the case, and it became an obsession that would last the rest of his life. Tom Grant wasn't a conspiracy theorist when this began. He was a cop, one who had spent years with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department before opening his own investigation firm, the Grant Company, in the early 1980s. He'd handled domestic disputes, fraud cases, and missing persons. By 1994, he was respected, quiet, and methodical, the kind of investigator who wrote everything down. When Courtney Love called him in early April 1994, she said her husband was missing, possibly suicidal, and might have returned to Seattle. She sounded frantic, but something about her story struck him as odd. She couldn't keep her facts straight. She said Kurt had fled rehab, that she'd canceled his credit cards, yet one of them was still being used. She seemed desperate but detached. Still, Grant took the job. He met Courtney at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills, gathered what information she had, and soon boarded a plane to Seattle with his colleague Jordy Bramer. When Grant arrived in Seattle, he met Dylan Carlson, Kurt's longtime friend, who agreed to help him search the property on Lake Washington Boulevard. They went through the house together on April 6, 1994, checking rooms, closets, and the detached garage. But they didn't climb up into the small greenhouse above it, a tucked-away space only reachable by a separate staircase. They didn't know they were just feet away from Kurt's body. The next morning, on April 8th, an electrician named Gary T. Smith arrived to install a security system. He looked through a window, saw a shotgun across someone's chest, and called police. The man inside was Kurt Cobain. The medical examiner later estimated he had been dead for 3 days, since April 5th, 1994. The scene looked straightforward to police. A Remington Model 1120 gauge shotgun lay across his body. There was a note written in red ink, addressed to Buddha, Kurt's imaginary childhood friend. A small cigar box of heroin paraphernalia sat nearby. Toxicology reports later showed a high level of heroin and diazepam in his system. The conclusion came fast. Kurt Cobain did this to himself. The case closed in a matter of days. But for Tom Grant, the details didn't add up. Grant noticed that the amount of heroin in Kurt's system, 1.52 milligrams per liter of blood, was, in his view, too high for anyone to function, let alone handle a shotgun. He argued that Cobain would have collapsed instantly. Police and medical experts disagreed, noting that chronic heroin users can develop a high tolerance. Grant also scrutinized the suicide note. He said the first part read more like a farewell to the music industry than to life, and only the last few lines, the ones about love and peace, resembled a final goodbye. To him, that part looked written in different handwriting. Handwriting experts hired by journalists and police later concluded the note was authentic, though the change in tone could have been emotional, not forged. Then there was the shotgun shell, ejected to the left side of Kurt's body. Grant pointed out that Cobain was right-handed, implying the shell shouldn't have landed there. Forensics experts later explained that depending on how the gun was angled, that detail wasn't unusual. Still, to Grant, the pattern was clear. The official version was too neat. In the weeks after the discovery, Grant began taping his phone calls with Courtney Love. Those recordings, hours of them, would later fuel his entire theory. In them, Courtney sounded erratic, sometimes changing details about what she knew or when she'd last heard from Kurt. She admitted she'd filed a missing person report using Kurt's mother's name, Wendy O'Connor, to avoid media attention. Grant also claimed Courtney told him contradictory stories. He grew suspicious not just of what she said, but how quickly she seemed to accept what happened. By his account, he warned Seattle police before the body was found that the case might not be what it looked like. He said he was ignored. When the case officially closed, he went public. Tom Grant launched his own independent investigation, releasing documents, photos, and his taped conversations online through CobainCase.com. He started giving interviews and appeared in documentaries like Kurt and Courtney and Soaked in Bleach, the latter dramatizing his investigation using real audio recordings. He raised 4 main arguments. The heroin level was too high for Cobain to operate the gun. The note wasn't a suicide letter, but a retirement statement. The gun had no usable fingerprints reported. The police ruling was too quick. Within hours, each point was challenged by official investigators. Seattle police stated the weapon and scene were properly processed for prints, though none were legible, which they said wasn't unusual. The handwriting was reviewed and confirmed to be Kurt's. In 2014, on the 20th anniversary of the case, the Seattle Police Department reviewed the evidence after developing previously undeveloped film from the scene. They clarified that the case had not been reopened, just re-examined. Their conclusion didn't change. Despite that, Tom Grant's doubts never faded. He's repeated the same phrase for years. All I ever wanted was a real investigation. To some, he's a whistleblower, the ex-cop who refused to be silenced. To others, he's a man chasing closure he'll never find. Either way, his persistence reshaped how the public remembers Kurt Cobain. Even people who weren't alive in 1994 still know the controversy because of him. Grant made the case more than a tragedy. He made it a question mark that refuses to fade. Today, Tom Grant lives quietly in California. He's in his 70s now, still maintaining his website and occasionally giving interviews. He says his files remain open, and his search for the truth never ended. Whether you believe him or not, one fact remains. Without Tom Grant, the story of Kurt Cobain's death might have been accepted and forgotten decades ago. Instead, it became one of rock's most haunting mysteries, a mystery kept alive by one man who wouldn't stop asking why.